My parents are from Donegal. I know it's very fashionable at the minute for comedians to have their parents on a TV show with them. Not an option if your parents are 80 and from Donegal. I don't trust elevators. And I'll tell you what else I don't trust. Ham. My parents have very, very mournful Donegal voices. Very, very sad voices indeed. My dad could make the lyrics to Zippity-Doo-Dah sound like a fucking cancer diagnosis. An adult cancer diagnosis, I would add. I know we've got limits around here. When I was growing up, there was still quite a lot of anti-Irish racism in Glasgow, which had two parts to it. One was Irish people are really stupid, and the other part was Irish people are taking Scottish folks' work, which wasn't even true. Right? It's an incredible self-own when you think about it. If they import any more idiots, I'm going to be out of a fucking job here. The Irish people finding it quite ironic that it took the Scottish people a long time to get that one. When I first went down to London as a teenager, that had anti-Scottish racism, and that had two parts to it. One was, Scottish people are all alcoholics, and I was. And the other part was, Scottish people are all really mean. They're really tight with money. That doesn't even make sense. I don't know how many alcoholics you've met. They tend not to be brilliant at budgeting. Of all the mornings I woke up going, oh, what the fuck did I do last night? I never discovered that I'd changed energy provider. Oh, here's a joke that goes really differently in England from the way it goes in Scotland. See if you can work out why. When I was at school, there were two guys in my class who were really badly bullied, but luckily it didn't affect them in later life because they both committed suicide. I'm not kidding, that gets a huge laugh in England. That gets a huge, uncomplicated laugh. Whereas by the time you get to Glasgow, people are going, yeah, they probably did. Yeah. Sad story. I was taken down from my school's wall of fame. Yeah. I salute them for doing it. I admire them for doing it. It was because I did a joke about this guy, and he was a brilliant guy. He was a wonderful human being. But it was his job to teach us sex education. So he'd come round once a month and preach the withdrawal method. And he had 9 children. And a twitch. I'm always amazed the Catholic Church still take the moral high ground about anything. After the stuff the priests did, even that incense was just so that they could create a fog that they could emerge from. You'd smell that at school, everyone would scatter. One wee asthmatic boy would go missing. What happened to Gregor? The last I saw, he was being raped by a cloud. I'm going to talk a wee bit about comedy, and I know that it's not the most important subject in the world at the minute. I know the planet's dying. People say the best thing you can do for the planet is to become a vegan. I don't think so. I think the best thing you can do for the planet is to become a cannibal. If you eat just one other person, you've reduced your carbon footprint by 100%. If you really want to make a difference, eat a pilot. When I started doing stand-up comedy, the most famous comedian among comedians was Bill Hicks. And his most famous routine among comedians was never do an advert or you're off the artistic roll call forever. And I fucking loved all that. And then as I got older, I started to do corporate shows, and I really fucking hated doing them. So maybe about 8, 9 years ago, I decided, well, I'll do those when I get asked, but I'll just give the money to charity, right? And I felt good about myself, right? I probably didn't achieve much, but at that point in life, I just saw myself as keeping that money away from Michael McIntyre. But, you know, then I thought, you know, if you did that and you felt good about yourself, why didn't you just do adverts and give the money away? You know, because I got offered adverts. I got offered an advert by Scottish Blend. Admittedly, I can't imagine what that advert could have been like. People who drink Tetley, fuck kids. You get these people, don't you? And they'll probably always be with us, who get offended by comedy. And I used to not mind until it occurred to me one day, most people who get offended by jokes watch porn. Like pretty much all of them. There's someone right now watching torture porn going, I hope nobody makes a joke about a fucking swimmer's nose. And then you get these other people who defend comedy, right? And they say, oh, this is a free speech issue. It's not a free speech issue, it's an artistic license issue. You're allowed to talk about it because it's not real on some level, right? I mean, there'll always be people who won't get it, right? There's always those people that go, I think you'll find that if two blokes actually took a crocodile into a pub, there would be fucking carnage. But it's not real, so we get to joke about it. I think people sometimes get confused with how they use humour in their own life with what this is. So most people use humour as a form of politeness, as an icebreaker. This isn't that. This is sentences that end in a very surprising way. It's hard to surprise people politely. Excuse me, I'm terribly sorry. Boo. I got a lot of flack a few years ago for doing some jokes about the Paralympic opening ceremony. And I've never seen why you wouldn't do exactly the same jokes about the Paralympic opening ceremony that you do about the Olympic opening ceremony. They're literally the same occasion. And the jokes had a point to them. They weren't just mockery. Right, so the one the papers hated the most was the Saudi Arabian Paralympic team are mainly thieves. Which has a point, right? It's about Sharia law. There's nothing worse than going to bed thinking you've tweeted some funny jokes about the Paralympic opening ceremony and waking up to find out that Channel 4 will never work with you again. And you've received several hundred angry tweets in Arabic. I don't care what anyone says, there's nothing scarier than Arabic plus an exclamation mark. What was the other one they hated? Oh yeah, the British Paralympic team holds the world high jump record, but to be fair, it was Taliban assisted. Also has a point, right? Not everybody has to like the point, but the point is, in among all these distractions, Britain was still fighting 2 wars. So I don't like people who lash out at jokes. At the same time, I don't like people who lash out at political correctness. I think it's lazy, and I think it sometimes encourages people to dismantle stuff that protects them. So I'll give you an example. There's a guy I talk to a lot in Glasgow. He's a homeless guy, and he was an alcoholic. I suppose that's why I talked to him, because I was an alcoholic. In fact, papers, when they have a go at me, they still write that. They put alcoholic Frankie Boyle. It's a really strange way to attack someone, by bringing up the time in life when they were happiest. Oh, by the way, I only get this in London. Have you ever had this? People go, don't give him money. He'll only spend it on beer and fags. I'd always assumed that they were spending it on beer and fags. I've never given money to a homeless guy and thought, well, I hope he's putting that into his ISA. So I was talking to this guy the last time I saw him, and I went, what would you say is your biggest problem in life at the minute? And he went, do you know my biggest problem, Frankie? It's all these fucking snowflakes in the media. It can't be. It just literally fucking cannot be. You're sleeping rough on the streets of Glasgow. Your biggest problem is actual flakes of fucking snow. So I was thinking about all this recently, right? I was watching Netflix. I had food poisoning a couple of weeks ago. So I was lying on the sofa, trusting every fart about as much as an email from a Nigerian general. And I watched Ricky Gervais's new stand-up special. And he does a big bit in it about trans women. Now, I've got nothing but love for trans women. I've got nothing but love and support for trans folk in general. But they themselves would admit it's a very contentious issue that people try not to talk about. And Ricky Gervais, obviously, he's a very powerful guy in show business. So nobody really who had the best years of their career ahead of them would tell you what they thought of that routine. Ricky Gervais, he does maybe 15 minutes where he goes, well, if a trans woman can say that they're a woman, I can say that I'm a chimpanzee. I'm a chimpanzee. And my genuine reaction was, it's not that much weirder than Ricky Gervais saying that he's a stand-up comedian. I mean, look, we know Ricky Gervais, he's a brilliant actor, he's a brilliant writer. He's not a fucking stand-up comedian. Just because Ricky Gervais self-identifies as a stand-up comedian. Am I supposed to say that he is one? His fucking political correctness gone mad. Also, loving animals, brilliant, wonderful. Going on about loving animals, suspect. So I watched the whole of Ricky Gervais' show and I felt a bit like Fred Astaire watching a guy in calipers fall down a fucking escalator. And then I watched Hannah Gadsby's show, Nanette. Now, it's a really great show. You should watch it if you get the chance. She talks a lot in it about comedy. And her main point is that she feels that herself as an oppressed person, she's often used her comedy to let the audience off too lightly. She makes a lot of really good points. I think the problem with stand-up comedy is that it simplifies stuff. It's hard to get at the truth when you've got to get a lot of regular laughs. And sometimes I think, am I trying to get at the truth here, or am I trying to just tell funnier lies? So, for example, I think she simplifies some stuff in her show. She says stand-up comedy works by creating a tension in the audience that's then punctured with a punchline. I don't think mine works like that. You know, I think for me, the tension arrives in the punchline. My uncle always said, do something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. He did heroin. The tension arrives in the punchline, and the set-up line is almost supposed to be soothing, really. People say, don't they? They say that you only regret the things that you don't do. I don't know who said that first, but it's someone who's never broken 2 corkscrews trying to get an unlubricated parsnip out of their arse. The tension arrives in the punchline. When I first started doing stand-up comedy, I used to compare comedy clubs in Glasgow and Edinburgh, the Stand Comedy Club mainly, and usually at a weekend. And at the time, Comedy Gold in Scotland was doing a Ned voice. What the fuck's that all about? What are you fucking talking about? People fucking loved stuff about Neds. And I'm sure I'm not blameless, right? I remember I had a line about the sort of women who announce they're pregnant by switching to menthol fags. But it was that voice, that was what people wanted, right? See, if you told the truth about that voice, I don't think it could have been contained within a comedy show. Certainly not at a weekend. What's that fucking Ned voice all about? Well, it probably comes from the fact that they're brought up in single-parent families by their mothers. And that's the pitch of a woman's voice with anxiety in it as she tries to raise her children to some kind of safety while compartmentalising her own upbringing of horrendous neglect and abuse. Anyway, it's time for your headline act. Let's get on here.